1995, and widow Megan Swanston is in her 70s. But instead of enjoying a peaceful retirement, Mrs. Swanston was making TV news headlines, all because she was locked in a ferocious legal battle with her 3 daughters.
I think to behave like this, and my husband had only been dead 6 months, I'm just not only devastated still, I'm just disgusted.
And this is what it was all about, this quaint cottage in a quiet village. Now, the house was home for pensioner Megan Swanston, but it was owned by Megan's 3 daughters. And when one of the daughters, ELAINE NIXON, found herself in a temporary financial difficulty, she wrote to her old mum saying the house would have to be sold to unlock the cash. Perhaps unsurprisingly, Mrs. Swanston ignored that letter. 5 days later, Mrs. NIXON wrote another letter to her mother. This time it gave Mrs. Swanston 8 weeks to get out of the house. Mrs. NIXON warned that she would do whatever is legally necessary to get possession. After a 2-year legal battle, which ended on the steps of the county court, an agreement was made that the house would be sold to a property developer, the 3 daughters would each take their share of the proceeds, and Mrs. Swanston would remain in the house as a tenant. And there she remained until she died from lung cancer at the age of 85 in December last year. This week, Mrs. Swanston's will became a public document, and it contains the final twist in a saga that began 15 years ago. The will reveals that Mrs. Swanston left everything she had, around £20,000, to Dr. Kershaw's hospice in Royton, but she ordered that nothing should go to her 3 daughters because of the way that they treated her. Megan Swanston is buried here in Failsworth Cemetery alongside her late husband, and that's essentially where this story ends, except in one important respect. It's unlikely that Megan was aware, but in her dying hours, her daughter ELAINE, with whom she fell out so bitterly all those years ago, travelled from Yorkshire to Dr. Kershaw's hospice to be at her mother's side in her final hours. Kevin Duffy for Channel M News.